The beeping wouldn't stop. That's the first thing I remember. Not the pain in my chest, not the cold floor of the grocery store, not the strangers kneeling over me. Just that steady, mechanical beeping that pulled me back from wherever I'd gone. My eyes opened to fluorescent lights, a ceiling I didn't recognize, and the slow dawning realization that I was alone. I am 63 years old. I've been alone before. I've buried a husband, sold a house, learned to do my own taxes, and fix my own leaky faucet. Alone doesn't scare me the way it used to. But waking up in a hospital bed, not knowing how you got there, not knowing how long you'd been there, that's a different kind of alone. That goes all the way to the bone. A nurse came in maybe 10 minutes after I opened my eyes. She was young, dark-haired, and she had the practiced calm of someone who'd seen too much to be rattled by a 63-year-old woman waking up confused. She told me I'd had a cardiac event. That's what they call it, a cardiac event, like it's something that happens on a calendar. She told me I'd collapsed in the cereal aisle of a Kroger on a Tuesday afternoon, that a man named Keith had performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, and that I'd been unconscious for nearly 18 hours. 18 hours. I asked her where my daughter was. She didn't answer right away. She checked something on her tablet, adjusted the IV line in my arm, and then she looked at me with an expression I didn't know how to read. She said the emergency contact on file had been called. Several times. She said someone from the hospital would come speak with me soon. I already knew before anyone said another word. I think part of me knew in that way you know things you don't want to know. The way you know a relationship is over before the conversation happens, the way you know something is wrong before the phone rings. My daughter had not come. Her name is Rebecca, though she's gone by Becca since she was 14 and decided Rebecca was too formal, too stiff, too much like her grandmother. She's 37 now. She lives 40 minutes away and her husband and their 2 sons, ages 7 and 10, and a golden retriever named something I can never remember. Captain maybe, or Chester. She sends me photos sometimes, mostly of the dog. We haven't always been close. I want to be honest about that. After her father passed, 6 years ago, something shifted between us. I can't name the exact moment. It was more like a slow draining, the way a bathtub empties. You don't notice until there's almost nothing left. She got busy with her life. I understood that. I tried to fit myself into the edges of it, the way mothers do. I'd drive out to watch the boys play soccer. I'd drop off food when she said she was swamped. I'd text and wait and text again. She would respond, eventually, with short answers. Fines, Mom. Thanks, Mom. We'll see. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself she was overwhelmed. I had a friend whose daughter had gone through something similar. A few rough years, some distance, and then everything smoothed out again. I believed that would happen for us. I kept believing it, right up until I woke up in that hospital bed and the nurse couldn't quite meet my eyes. The doctor came in around noons. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a handshake that was too firm for someone delivering this kind of news. He told me I'd had what he called a moderate cardiac event. A heart attack. Let's just call it what it was and that I'd need surgery. Not immediately, but soon. Within the week, he wanted to keep me for observation, run more tests, and then we'd schedule the procedure. And then, almost gently, he told me that his team had attempted to reach my emergency contact 31 times over the course of 18 hours. 31 times. He said it without accusation, which somehow made it worse. He said it like a fact, the way you'd say the temperature outside or the time of day. He told me they'd also tried my son-in-law's number, which I had listed as a secondary contact, and that those calls had gone unanswered as well. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. I asked him who had been with me, then, through the night. He said a woman named Rosalind. A church friend of mine, someone I hadn't even thought to list as a contact, had seen the ambulance outside the Kroger, recognized my car in the parking lot, and followed up until someone at the hospital confirmed I was there. She'd sat with me through most of the night. She'd gone home a few hours ago to take care of her husband, who has Parkinson's. Rosalind, who I've known for 11 years through a Wednesday morning Bible study group, who is 71 years old and drives a 15-year-old Buick and brings lemon bars to every potluck, even though nobody has ever once asked her to. Rosalind had sat by my bed in a hospital she didn't belong to, watching a woman with machines attached to her chest, while my daughter 40 minutes away did not pick up the phone. I didn't cry. I want to say that I cried, that there was some release in that room, some moment of breaking, but I didn't. I just nodded at the doctor like he'd told me something ordinary, and I asked about the surgery timeline. My son-in-law called the next morning. Not my daughter, her husband. He said he was sorry, that they hadn't heard their phones, that they'd had friends over and things got loud and somehow, he said somehow they'd missed the calls. All of them. All 31 of them. I said, how is everyone? He said, fine, good, yeah. So you're doing okay? I said I'd had a heart attack and needed surgery. He said, wow. That's a lot. Well, let us know if you need anything. I said I would. I didn't say anything else. I hung up and I looked out the hospital window at the parking lot below, at the people coming and going, at a man helping an elderly woman out of a car with careful hands. I watched him walk slowly beside her all the way to the entrance, and I thought about my husband, who would have been at that hospital before the ambulance doors closed, who would have slept in a plastic chair for a week if that's what it took. My daughter called that afternoon, 2 days after I'd been admitted. She didn't ask how I was. She started with, I know you're upset, Mom, like I was a child having a feeling that needed to be managed. She said things had been stressful, that the boys had activities, that they'd had prior commitments. She said she'd been meaning to call, but the days just got away from her. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't say any of the things that were crowding my throat. When she finished, I said, I understand. She seemed surprised by that. She said, so you're not mad? I said, I need surgery on Friday. I'll be fine. She said, okay. Do you want us to? I mean, should we come? I said, don't worry about it. There was a pause. Then she said she was glad I was okay and that she'd check in soon. I said, of course. I had the surgery on Friday. Rosalind drove me. She packed me a bag with things I hadn't thought to pack myself. A soft cardigan, good socks, a crossword book, some of those individually wrapped peppermints that hospitals never seem to have. She sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. When I came out of recovery, she was the first face I saw, and she was holding a bad cup of vending machine coffee like it was something precious. And she said, you're going to be perfectly fine, and I want you to know that I almost did the crossword without you. I held it together until she said that. And then I cried. Not for the surgery, not for the fear, but because the kindness of it was almost too much to take. I went home 5 days later. My daughter texted that week. Short things. Hope the recovery is going well. Thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything. The kind of texts you send when you want to have sent them. I responded the way she had responded to me for years. Fine, thanks. Of course. My neighbor's daughter, a 26-year-old named, well, she calls herself Quinn, though that's a nickname. She started stopping by, brought groceries the first week, made sure my prescriptions were filled. She works from home and she'd knock on my door in the middle of the afternoon just to see if I needed anything from the kitchen, which is a 30-second walk from my living room, but the gesture of it mattered. Her mother had asked her to look in on me, she said. But after the first few days, I think she came on her own terms. 3 weeks after I got home, my grandsons came to visit. Not with my daughter, she wasn't there. My son-in-law brought them, which surprised me, though now I think he understood more than he'd let on during that phone call. The boys ran in like they always do, and they climbed on me carefully because they'd been told to be careful. And the older one said, Grandma, we heard you scared everyone, and I said, I scared myself a little too. They stayed for 2 hours. They told me about school and a video game I'll never understand and a kid in the younger one's class who can burp the alphabet. I laughed more than I'd laughed in months. After they left, I sat very still in my living room for a long time. I'd had the boys here, with their noise and their sneakers left at the door and their requests for specific snacks I didn't have, and it had been fine. More than fine. But their mother hadn't come, and I realized, sitting there in the quiet she'd left, that I had been waiting for her to come for a long time. Not just since the hospital, for years. I had been waiting for the version of my daughter who used to call just to talk, who used to drive over without a reason, who used to need me, or at least let me feel like she did. I stopped waiting somewhere in that quiet room. I called my attorney the following week. He's a patient man who has known me for 20 years and who did not raise an eyebrow at what I asked for. I had a will. I'd made it 7 years ago, the year after my husband died, when everything felt urgent and finite. My estate, the house, the retirement accounts, the life insurance payout I'd never touched, went primarily to my daughter. A modest amount to a local literacy charity. That was it. I changed it. I didn't cut my daughter out entirely. I want to be clear about that because I'm not someone who acts from anger. I've had enough years to know the difference between a decision you make angry and a decision you make clear. I thought about it for 2 weeks before I called the attorney. I thought about it in the shower and on my morning walks and at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. I thought about what my daughter had shown me, not just once, not just during a bad patch, but over years of accumulation. A pattern, not a moment. I restructured things. A portion still goes to her. A meaningful portion to each of my grandsons, held in trust for their education. I wasn't punishing them for their mother's choices. A significant portion to Rosalind, who will probably be furious with me when she finds out, and whom I will have to argue with at length about whether she deserves it, and who absolutely does. And I established a small scholarship in my husband's name at the local community college. He never went to college, he always has wished he had. I didn't tell my daughter any of this. I didn't tell anyone, actually. Not Quinn, not Rosalind, not the women from Bible study who had been quietly rallying around me in the way older women do, with food and cards and the specific generosity of just showing up. I didn't announce it or explain it. I just did it. And then I came home and made myself a cup of tea and sat on my back porch and watched the light change over the yard and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Settled. That's the word. I felt settled. My daughter called on a Sunday in November, almost 2 months after the surgery. I was pulling out my winter sweaters and I almost didn't answer because my hands were full, but I did. She asked how I was doing. I said, well, she said the boys missed me. I said I missed them too. She said maybe we could all have dinner soon. Maybe before Christmas. I said that sounded nice. We talked for 12 minutes. It was perfectly pleasant. She asked about my follow-up appointments and I told her they'd gone well. She told me her husband had gotten a promotion at work. She said the dog had chewed through his 3rd collar. I asked the dog's name, and she said, Mom, it's Chester. We've had him for 4 years. And I laughed and said, of course, Chester, and she laughed a little too. And for those 12 minutes it was almost like we were just 2 people who liked each other. When we hung up, I sat down on the edge of my bed with a sweater in my lap. I was not angry. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I had expected to feel angry for longer than I did, and the anger did come, those first weeks. It came in waves, sharp and disorienting. But by November it had mostly passed, and what was left wasn't resentment exactly. It was more like clarity. Like having your eyes adjusted after years of a slightly wrong prescription. You don't mourn the blurriness. You're just glad you can finally see. My daughter loves me, I think, in the way people love things they take for granted. In the way you love a house you grew up in. You assume it will always be there. You don't tend to it the way you should. And then one day something happens and you realize it might not always be there. And the feeling that produces is love. But it arrives too late to be useful. I am not bitter. I want to be clear about that too. Bitterness is an exhausting thing to carry. And I've been tired enough these past months without adding that weight. I made my decisions quietly and I made them clearly, and now I'm living the kind of life that has space in it. For Rosalind and her lemon bars, for Quinn knocking on my door in the afternoon, for 2 small boys who climb on me carefully and tell me about a kid who can burp the alphabet. I booked a trip to Savannah for April. Solo, a nice hotel with a clawfoot tub that I saw in a travel magazine while I was waiting for a cardiology appointment. My husband always wanted to go to Savannah. He'd cut out an article about it once, from some newspaper, and kept it in his desk drawer for 15 years. I found it when I was cleaning out his things and I kept it. I've kept it all this time. I'm going to go for both of us. Rosalind is coming. I asked her on a Tuesday morning after Bible study, almost as an afterthought, and she looked at me like I'd offered her something she'd wanted for a long time but hadn't let herself want. She said she'd never been to Georgia. I said I hadn't either. She said she'd need to find someone to help with her husband for a few days. And I said we'd figure it out. And she said, you know, I've never been anywhere with a friend in about 15 years. And I said then it's time. We leave in April. The hotel has a restaurant that's been open since 1896. And I plan to order whatever I want and sit there for as long as I please. My daughter texted last week. She said she'd heard I was doing well, that I seemed more like myself lately. She put a little heart at the end. I read it twice. I texted back feeling good. Talk soon. I meant it. We probably will talk soon. We will have dinners before Christmas and I will watch my grandsons get bigger year by year. And my daughter and I will have 12-minute phone calls that are perfectly pleasant and only sometimes a little sad. But I kept my money. I kept my peace. And I kept the lesson she taught me without ever meaning to. The one about who shows up when you're down on a hospital floor and you can't get up yourself. The one about who actually comes. The ones who come, those are the people you hold on to. The rest, You love from a comfortable distance, and you let them take up exactly as much space as they've earned. Chester. I finally remembered. His name is Chester.